Good morning. My name is Estelle Metayer. I'm the president of Campetia and a professor at McGill University. I'm very happy to be here today with Karl Simon. We're bright and early today at Movin'On. I'm going to let you introduce yourself and explain to us what you do, and then I'll dive into with some questions.
Great. Good morning, Estelle, and thank you for giving me a chance to chat with you today. My name's Karl Simon. I'm the director of the Transportation and Climate Division at the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. Our office sets standards for all things moving and the fuels that go in them. I get to particularly think about the future in terms of transportation planning and thinking about what the world of mobility could look like in 10 or 20 or 40 years, and working with partners to help that vision come about. And we also get to work with people in the green freight sector, for example, and some programs that we have that help provide information and some incentives to the supply chain to really get at some of the environmental issues that they're struggling through as well.
And I'm happy we're talking about freight because we spoke a lot about passenger transportation yesterday. So I wanted to dive into this new world of supply chains and freight. We have a lot of manufacturers who are trying to figure out how to ship products and how to get products
Yes.
in a more efficient way. So tell us a little bit about what you see going on the horizon for freight management and supply chains in particular.
Yeah, when you look at freight, when you look at, and unfortunately in the U.S., transportation has become the #1 source of greenhouse gas emissions over the last couple of years. So not really a great distinction, but certainly brings attention to the issue. So when you look at the sectors, freight may be one of the faster growing sectors in terms of all projections are for the future that freight's going to double or triple. Thinking about how you get your goods, e-commerce certainly plays into that factor as well too, and thinking about next day delivery. All those things that that are kind of common to our consumer day-to-day existence. Thinking about how you get that product from the producer to your doorstep, the logistics around that is both fascinating and super complicated. So there are things that companies can do. There's information that can get out into the marketplace that allows for greener delivery choices. So how you can reduce emissions, and the nice thing about working in this space and finding win-wins is that it is greenhouse gas reductions and pollutants mostly are tied to saving money. So there's a nice co-benefit in terms of finding those programs that can help working with
it's really a win-win situation.
Exactly.
Right? Can you give us examples about what you mean by green kind of transportation for goods? And I will pick up then on the e-commerce growth and the challenges that poses, but also opportunities to do things differently.
Sure. We started a program a few years back called the Smart Way program, for example, and that program had its beginnings in telling and working with fleets to say, gee, it may not be a great idea to run your 400 horsepower diesel engine to power your TV and your air conditioning. So looking at ways for auxiliary power units that can go on trucks that are much more efficient, finding ways where trucks can reduce their idling, because idling is just wasting money, basically, it's wasting fuel. And it's grown from there. So now we're to the point of where we have complicated and sophisticated partners like UPS telling folks how they can manage their logistics, for example. So our program now is 4,000 partners, from everybody from the shippers to the carriers to logistics companies. And what they do is they report out that information to us, their greenhouse gas profiles over the year, best practices. We have a service in place that allows for that information to get out to our partner base, and people can learn from that experience, but they also get rated how they do. That rating now becomes a target for other people. If you're hiring a trucking firm, if you're a high rating, that's going to get you more business, is what we've seen as the feedback loop. So really kind of getting people, and it's not just one thing, it's a lot of little things that people can kind of do. So better technologies, looking at aerodynamic. If you see some trucks going down the road that may have skirts underneath the trailers, that's a Smart Way benefit in terms of just reducing those. Those can get 3, 4, 5% fuel savings. That's real money for people, and it doesn't seem like much, but it makes a big difference at the bottom line.
So the business case is quite valid. It's interesting you're mentioning. We had a company here last year who was talking about how they would allow trucks who do frequent stops to automatically not just idle but just cut off the engine and then
Yeah.
so that they wouldn't have to use that much fuel. You use the term of multimodal versus intermodal, and we know intermodal has been a revolution in the world of supply chains. So what's the next big steps? Can you give us examples of what you've seen elsewhere or in the US?
Yeah, I think you're starting to see, and we're seeing that transition to getting people thinking about sustainability as more of a factor in your transportation choices for moving goods. So, your indirect emission sources that companies are reporting for part of their corporate social responsibility reports. That all kind of falls into this freight sector in terms of what you want to get at. So being able to both quantify that on a regular basis, and we're working with, in fact, our SmartWay program is probably the only program in the transportation office that has French documents on it, because it's a completely seamless North American program right now, which has been a really positive experience for us working with our Canadian colleagues
I didn't know that.
and
Okay.
running. Yeah, it's seamless across the border because we move a lot of freight across the border. So
Big trading partner.
the industry partners wanted that, and we made it happen. So that's been really good. And thinking about how we get goods, it's a worldwide economy. So being able to do the same thing for tracking that good from where it's produced to where it's consumed, where the ultimate end consumer. So other countries are starting to follow that same model as
Yeah,
well.
I guess that the territory we have in North America allows us to be running out on a large scale, right?
We do, yeah.
Just before I move on to cities, because I know you've been also involved with data and cities, I have a question on e-commerce. We talk a lot about the last mile, and we've seen, patents deposited for drones deliveries and so on. So
Yes.
I'm just curious to see how you see this world evolving, because it looks a little like a dream, and I'm not sure it's practical. So is it actually something that will concretely ever happen?
I think you're moving in that direction. I mean, you're starting to see, you're going to see options, right? I think is what it'll be, as opposed to the relatively complicated but linear straight delivery truck. We move a lot of goods in this country by truck.
Yeah.
The future will be different cities. So as we move more people into cities, the demographics are clear that seems to be where people want to live. Congestion, you'll have other factors that will kind of act against being able to do that straight delivery truck. So you may have bicycle delivery, you'll have drones in the city, maybe not, but drones in the country make some sense because you're not doing that last mile. That's an efficiency gain there if you can move stuff in that good. So I do think we'll get smarter, and you'll see more and more of that moving to a multimodal approach in terms of how you deliver things.
So urban and rural might be very different
Yes.
stories in the future. Let's just dive a little bit into the cities, because to do this, there's a lot of data that is collected by cities, that is needed by cities. How do you see this world evolving on we'll talk about smart cities, but really the data piece of it? Who will own it? Who are the players who are emerging?
Yeah, no, it's a fascinating area in terms of trying to figure out what those dynamics are going to look like in terms of where you get that information from, because it's super important to understand the impacts. If you look at, just an example, look at the growth of the transportation network companies like Uber and Lyft, and some of the cities that have done that work are now seeing that have a fairly negative traffic impact. So what's that feedback loop? And you really have to get at, I think the cities are going to be where you're going to have those levels of experimentation, unfortunately, or fortunately, I think in this case. So the cities really need to have a sense as to what that data is, and that would be getting at it. But data privacy is a really interesting area for folks to struggle with, and we make choices as consumers every day that go maybe in different routes for data privacy, but you still need to respect it, because there's just data is only going to get more prevalent. It's really cheaper by the day to collect it. What the challenge is collecting it isn't necessarily the hard part. The challenge is trying to figure out what it's telling you, and what are you really collecting it for, and do you need it? And that's that's a hard conversation to have with folks. You got to get everybody around the table.
Yeah, and we know geolocalization is going to be a big piece of managing the flows of people and goods in cities. And governments are trying to figure out how much open data they can give to the different players to actually figure out and have an integrated approach.
Yes.
Instead of a one-off. And unintended consequences of the sharing economy have not been planned, right? But
No, it seems like we're reactionary at this point, and
very
it's
much so,
and you may be in that space for a while because the technology change is moving faster than policy for a lot of folks, city, state, province, national level in terms of that. So trying to get smart practices in place that allow for that innovation without stifling it, but also recognizing that there are some limits here. It just isn't unfettered.
There's a lot of talks about sandboxes, so companies can play and start, and we can observe before getting it on a larger scale.
Yeah, and that's a hard thing for governments to do, is because we're not set up to do that very well, and certainly our constituents aren't really happy when programs fail, but you need to have some space for that innovation and experimentation and be able to learn from it.
Yeah, very interesting, this notion of experimentation, right? And excellent. I see we have a few minutes left. Any conclusion, any message you want to share with moving on today on what you're hopeful for, or what you really want to tackle in the next 10 years of your career?
Yeah. Well, boy, there's a loaded question. Certainly the freight area, I think, is a really fascinating one, because that's where you may see, just given the economic dynamics and the way that industry is set up, you may see more innovation in that space than you do in the passenger car space. And there's a lot of discussion about autonomous vehicles and all that, but really looking at that freight sector as a place to really understand how some of these technologies that we're hearing about around the conference will play out, I think will be really important. So,
talking about trucks being the pulse of the North American economy, right? And I think it will happen there probably way before it happens for
but it's not just trucks. Certainly, we look multimodal. So trains. People are starting to think about autonomous, vessels and harbors and all the things that come along with that. So, what does that mean for us as what are those issues we're going to wrestle with as a society to get comfortable with that space.
Excellent. So you're going to be busy for the next few years.
Yeah, it's not dull, certainly.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much for that interview, and enjoy your moving on.
Great. It's been great so far, and I look forward to the rest of the 2 days.
Thank you.
Thank you, Estelle.